To be brief. However, I also want to highlight some important elements of the next speaker's life and how valuable his story and his family's story is to this community we call the Muslim community in America. He's an individual, you see his name in the program. His name is Abdul, Karim, Hasan. His mother and his uncle were a part of the Marcus Garvey movement and the Drew Ali movement. And while his mother was carrying him in the womb, his uncle asked her if she could name the child if it was a boy. And he was named after a Moroccan general. If my memory is serving me correctly, he was named after a Moroccan general who was fighting against colonial powers trying to come into Africa. And he was given the name at birth, Abdul Karim. So his history is something that's very important to our journey to Islam. And at about 12 years old, I understand he used to wear the red Moroccan fez, and his mother was finding things for her children to be a part of that were culturally relevant and also a part of a conscious movement to make them better people. And he told me later on in a private conversation that his mother invited him to come to something else, and he was a teenager at this point. And he said he had kind of got tired of his mother finding something for him to join. But he went to the meeting anyway, and El Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, was at that meeting. And that was, I think, in 1956 or 55. And he went to that meeting, and he accepted, he was energized, he became an energetic worker for establishing mosques and temples, and as we understood them at that time and called them at that time, and he's been a productive worker ever since. So I don't want to say more because I don't want to take away from his time, but his history is something you should be aware of. His family history is significant. What he continues to do in South Central Los Angeles is significant. They built a school from the ground up. Takbir, takbir, takbir. And whenever you're there on a weekday in Los Angeles at 4016 South Central Avenue, and the parking lot is full of children and it's full of families and mothers and fathers coming to pick up their children, and the school is operating with efficiency, it does your heart a lot of good to see that. And they did it without getting in debt. He's from a family, they knew how to farm. So one of the things about learning how to farm, you learn how to be wise. So I'm not going to say anything else. Please, Imam Abdul Karim Hasan, address us as you will. Takbir, 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 takbir.
Assalamu alaikum. Sharif. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. All praise is due to Allah. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord and Cherisher
mic because they can't hear you.
All praise is due to Allah. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord and Cherisher of all the world, and as Imam Muhammad says, of all the systems of knowledge. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. With Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Our dear believers, we're grateful and we're thankful to Allah for this fundraising meeting and for the people that are here that we can call our brothers and sisters. And we're talking about all of the people that can hear me and all of those who can't. We recognize you as Muslims, as our brothers and our sisters. You know, at one time, we didn't have mics. In the early days, we didn't have mics. We had to talk loud and fast to keep the attention of the people. But with the invention and with the affordability of mics, we don't need to talk loud and fast anymore because the people's attention is already here. Allah has blessed them and has blessed us to be an audience together, to recognize each other and to respect each other enough to listen for a few short minutes. As Minister Malcolm used to say, may Allah forgive him of his faults and accept him in his paradise, that we have to talk fast enough to keep them from falling asleep. Because our people, once you start talking sense and business, they get sleepy. So we needed to experience an educational system that will allow us to perk up and be alive when we are talking sense and when we are talking business. I'm grateful and thankful to Imam El-Amin for the invitation to come here, and I didn't hesitate because this is another home of mine. I love it here. I love the people here. And I see a lot of people that I know that are not from here. Well, first of all, I see my good brother over here, Imam Fahim Shaib, good man, good brother, I love him. And he is very helpful in this progress of the community. And Sharif, over here at this table, I've been knowing him for many, many years. He is about 6'7", but he looks like he's about 7'2". He's always been a good brother and a hard worker coming out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so I've known him a long time. So that's a sign that there's stability. There's stability in this community. And most of the brothers and the sisters that I've seen tonight and I've met and I've conversed with, I've seen them a lot, just about every time I'm here. And that tells me that we are a stable group. I want to tell you a story, and it's not going to take long because this is excerpts from a transcript that I'm writing for a book that Imam Muhammad had asked me to do, several years ago. It's just taken me so long because there are so many other things that you have to do in the meantime. But inshallah, we'll get it done. Inshallah, it will eventually be completed. But writing is not something that's easy to do unless you can separate yourself from people and lock yourself up in a room somewhere where you could think and research and put all of the information together in your mind before you start recording it. But this story that I want to tell this evening are excerpts from what I have already written. And it's about the evolution of this community, starting out as the lost found tribe of Shabazz, members of the Nation of Islam. Or I should say, lost and found members of the Nation of Islam. Not the Nation of Islam. We were not called that. We were called members of the tribe of Shabazz. Lost and now found members of the Nation of Islam, which meant that we were members of a larger group that is referred to as the Nation of Islam. And somewhere in the processes of time and the loss of the translation, we dropped the tribe of Shabazz and just kept the Nation of Islam. But the Nation of Islam is not a group of African American people in America. The Nation of Islam is a name that applies to every Muslim on this planet Earth. They are the Ummah of Prophet Muhammad, prayers and peace be upon him. And when I was growing up, they used to refer to before I became conscious of myself as being a Muslim, they used to refer to the Muslims as a Muslim world. Not just a Muslim group, a Muslim community, or a Muslim religion, but a Muslim world. This is a book. I don't know how many of you have seen this book. I don't think many of you have ever seen it. This book is titled Muslim World and the USA. And on the cover of it, in this issue, it says a young Chicago Muslim, Sister Zainab Sharif. Sister Zainab Sharif was the daughter, or is the daughter, of our former Supreme Captain. He has passed on, may Allah forgive him and accept him in his paradise, Raymond Sharif and his wife Ethel. This book was printed in 1956 by a Muslim from India who was the publisher and the editor of this little small magazine by the name of Abdul Basit Naeem. Abdul Basit Naeem. He took a liking to the community, and every convention that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had started in 55, 56, and 57 was recorded and printed in this book. A book like this referred to as the Muslim World in the USA. This book is important. I used to sell this book. This book came out in the year that I accepted to be a member of the Muslim community. We had them, we sold them. Now I don't know why I kept this book and three others like three others, different issues. But I've kept them from those years. I did not sell. 4 of them I did not sell. I kept them. but I hardly read them. I hardly read them. When I began to work on the transcript for the book, I started researching the material that I had already stored, and I ran across those 4 books, this being one of them. And the reason why I brought this one, because I wanted to read to you something that was written in 1956 that had became a reality through the evolutionary period today, that has become a reality today. I was invited to a college in the psychology department in Southern California last year. I took this book with me. These students who were working on their doctorate degrees were questioning me about the community. So in the process of the questioning, I read part of what was written in this book. And what the professor of the class said, happened to be a lady from Pakistan. She said the man that made that statement was a wise man. He said he was a man with foresight. He was a man with vision. And this was in 1956. When we look back over the history and the evolutionary movement of our history, some of us are very surprised to see how things developed. You know, we know and have been told, and most of us understand, that there was a man who appeared among the African American people in Detroit, Michigan, in the first years of the 1930s, teaching African American history before their introduction to slavery in America. He never talked too much about slavery. He taught about pre-slavery. And he told the stories from house to house as he was selling his wares and his goods of tapestries and other beautiful things to the people who would allow him to talk to them. He was selling their goods and telling them about their history before they were brought to America. He came from the Far East himself. He came alone, we are told, and he gave his name to Mr. W.D. Farad. I like to use that name even though he had other names too. And I like to use that name simply because that name was on all of the lessons that he gave to the people in that day, including the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He signed them Mr. W.D. Farad. He brought with him, according to one of his most advanced students, 104 books, the most important of which was the Quran, the Holy Quran. That was the most important of the 104 books. He did not teach religion. You know, people who say really don't know. As Malcolm used to say a lot in answering some questions when they wanted to know how many members that the nation was in the Nation of Islam, Malcolm used to say, those who say don't know, and those who know won't say. Well, the same thing is true about people today. They say things that they really don't know. He did not teach religion. He mentioned religion, but he did not teach religion. He taught history. He called it the knowledge of self. And his idea was, that in order for us to be introduced to religion, we had to know something about ourselves first. We had to know something about who we were and what we have become. We had to know that first before we were introduced to religion. If we were introduced to religion after the indoctrination period that convinced us that we should follow the religion of the people that enslaved us, that we would not accept religion on those bases. So he first had to teach us the knowledge of ourselves and who we were and what we were before we were ever brought into slavery. He did say that their religion was Islam, which meant, according to the board that we used to call a national, freedom, justice, and equality. But he did not teach Islam. He implied that the science of the religion of Islam would come later. He attracted a large following with the history that he taught, telling them of the glorious freedom and justice and equality that they experienced before they were brought to America. Now remember, this is excerpts. I'm skipping a lot, but you'll find it in my transcript when I finish it. In 1933, after establishing the first temple in Detroit, Mr. W.D. Farad moved to Chicago with his most advanced student, whom he named Muhammad. His name was already Elijah. First name was Elijah. He tried to change Elijah. In fact, he did offer him the name Abdul Karim. But he didn't like the name Abdul Karim. So he offered him the name Abdul Muhammad. He liked Muhammad, but he asked him, could he keep his first name, his given name, Elijah. So he wore the name Elijah Muhammad. And he came to Chicago with Elijah Muhammad, his supreme minister, as he was called in those days, and his family. And the two of them established Temple Number 2 in Chicago. Then they went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and established Temple Number 3. Mr. Farad was a worker. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was a worker. They were doers. They did not sit down on the laurels of Temple Number 1 or Temple Number 2. They were not satisfied, so they went out and founded another one, Temple Number 3. In 1934, Mr. W.D. Farad left America. He left his chosen student to finish the mission of teaching the African Americans the knowledge of themselves and to build a nation that would eventually connect them with the Muslim world. But he did not teach religion. Mr. W.D. Farad's parting words were, "You don't need me anymore." This is what he told his favorite student when he left. He said, "It is your job now to build this community, this nation, and you don't need me anymore." So he left. From 1934 to 1956, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad established 7 more temples, practically on his own. 6 on the East Coast and 1 on the West Coast. The one on the West Coast was San Diego. That's the first temple outside of the East Coast, was San Diego. It was one of the 10. In 1956, in Hartford, Connecticut, my mother, who was a loyal and obedient member of the Morris Science Temple, invited me and my other brothers and sisters to a meeting to hear a young minister by the name of Malcolm X, who represented the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It was not a religious meeting, it was a history meeting, preparing the audience's mind for the introduction of the religion of Islam. There were 10 numbered temples at that time in 1956. And from 1956 to 1963, 20 more temples were added to that number 10, which made it 30. By 1963, that 10 had turned into 30 additional temples. After Minister Malcolm was sent to Harlem as the minister and West Coast representative, progress was made. And progress was made very swiftly. And you know, and you must be prepared that when progress is made, criticism begins. Criticism crops up. So I remember hearing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad say once that if you want to see how much the people love you, just try to make progress among the downtrodden people. If you want to see how much you think people care for you, try to make progress among the people that are most disliked and despised. So criticism, because of the growth of the community, criticism began. Criticism from Muslim students. Muslim students in the United States whose parents back home began to be contacted by them with their complaints. So the criticism against the movement in America of the African Americans under their leadership began to rise. The complaint was prayer was not being performed as it was being done back home. Prayer in the temples was not being done. That was their complaint. Prayer in the temples was not being done. Now, when Mr. Abdul Naim received these complaints, he took them to the house and gave them to Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave him his answer to the complaints, and he put them in this book in 1956. And in the process, he gave a forethought answer to him of what was going to happen in the future. Now some people say that we were introducing something into Islam that wasn't there. Well, we were not teaching Islam, number one. Some people say that we were inventing something in Islam. We were not teaching Islam, number two. The teaching was history. We had to be prepared. You have to understand, dear believers, and if you understand this way, you'll get a better understanding of how and why the Nation of Islam, under the leadership that we had, grew so swiftly. When you prepare for prayer, those of you who praise the Muslim prayer, what do you have to do before you pray? You have to clean up. You have to wash and prepare yourself to pray. You just don't pray. You just don't say it's time for prayer and you run and pray. No, you have to clean up. But if you don't have any knowledge of yourself and your history, how can you prepare mentally to pray? If you have been living a life of gambling, a life of drinking and smoking and eating the pig, eating the hog, if you have been living a life of debauchery, how can you teach that person to pray? You have to clean that person up first, then prepare him to come to the mind that he is praying to his own Creator before you can begin teaching him to pray. You have to prepare him to pray. And that's what was being done by the Nation of Islam. In this book, in 1956, it says, this is Abdul Naim telling the Elijah Muhammad the criticism. He said, a few of the Muslim groups in the United States have alleged in letters to a prominent Muslim leader abroad that Mr. Elijah Muhammad's followers aren't taught to perform their daily prayers. 1956. Mr. Muhammad emphatically denies this, saying that the day is nearing when you will see them climbing to the top of minarets, proclaiming the glory of Allah, and flocking to the mosque as good Muslims do in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Morocco, and Pakistan. 1956. He continues, according to Mr. Muhammad, a mosque or masjid will be erected for Muslims wherever there is a temple of Islam in America. Is not that what we're trying to do tonight? Is that not what has been done in other parts of America? In places where there were temples, mosques, masajids are being built for the purpose of the worship of Allah. Isn't that being done? But a cleanup had to be done first. We didn't even know the meaning of a masjid. We didn't know the meaning of Islam. We didn't know the meaning of Muslim. We didn't even have a sense of what that name Allah meant, even though we had it and we had the Quran before us, but we were reading it with a mind that was deaf, dumb, and blind to the knowledge of itself. So our answers from that book would be the same as what we were thinking before. But once our mind was cleaned up and set on the right track, then we were able to accomplish the thing in the right way. Our Aqidah would have been set in motion. Allahu Akbar. That's not all. According to Mr. Muhammad, okay, it says, according to Mr. Muhammad, a mosque will be erected for Muslims wherever there is a temple of Islam in America. The latter, meaning the temples, being a lecture hall or place of instruction. This is the definition of a temple. An instruction hall or place of instruction. They were set up with chairs. In a place of prayer, there are no chairs. Because we are making a complete submission to God rather than sitting up in chairs applauding and clapping. Goes on. He says this, that Mr. Abdul Naim, the Muslim brother from India, of all the Muslim leaders in the country, Mr. Muhammad is the only one who has shown any amount of concern of the education of Muslim children and the protection of Muslim women. Allahu Akbar. That was a description of what a temple was and what a masjid is. The community was evolving, and it was evolving in a rapid pace. On Saturday morning, February the 25th, 1975, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad died in Chicago's Mercy Hospital. Minister Wallace D. Muhammad was elected that evening as the new leader and confirmed by over 20,000 Muslims the next day, which was Sunday, February the 26th. Several thousand of them traveling from as far away as Florida, Massachusetts, New York, Texas, and California. All there witnessing the death of one leader and the rise of another. From day one, Imam Muhammad began to introduce to the community the understanding of the primary source of the religion of Al-Islam, which is the Quran. As he traveled his plans and introductory literature and laid out the processes for our spiritual freedom, we grew to see and understand the real meaning of freedom. Now let me interject this. Imam Muhammad, during his time away from his father, for rejecting some of the ideas that his father was preaching about God, he had studied the religion and he had found that religion was not being taught, which he already knew. In the 1967 Hajj pilgrimage on Mount Arafat, that was 10 years before he took a delegation of 300 Muslims on Hajj. That is the largest group of identifiable Muslims that have ever left America before 1977 and after 1977. He went on his own in 1967. He had a passport and no visa. And he went to the Hajj, and on that Hajj trip, he met some of the most popular and some of the most famous Muslim leaders in the world at that time. One of them was a great thinker of India, Maududi. Maududi, you've heard of. He wrote and he has translated the Quran. Now in Maududi's speech on Mount Arafat, the Imam shared this message with us. He was cautioning the other Muslim leaders that was in his tent. He was saying to them, don't get so excited. After he introduced Minister Wallace Muhammad as a Muslim from America, he was cautioning them not to get too excited. He said, don't get too excited that you want to just go to America now and think that you are going to help the people that are coming into Islam. Maududi told them to leave the Muslims in America alone. They will find their way. That's what life is. Life will find its way. A blade of grass you will see growing up through concrete. That blade of grass is life. It will find its way. You just have to leave it alone. And Maududi was telling them that is one of the signs of Allah. Leave them alone. They will find their way. If you go over there teaching them your cultural message rather than the religion, you will spoil them. Now I'm telling you truth. We learn that our real freedom will come to us when we are spiritually free, when we know what situation will be good for our human spirit, and then start living to get to that situation, then we are spiritually free. That's right. And we could not have been free until those things happened. Right. Mr. W.D. Farad didn't teach this. He didn't teach this aspect of the religion. He said that help would come from a particular son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he would be a big help to his father. Now, let me read you something of the first of the things that Imam Muhammad said as he began his leadership. He said, we have to take this glorious Quran down from the shelf. You know, we were taught to put the Holy Quran on the highest shelf in the house. And that's where we put it, and that's where it stayed. He said, we have to take this glorious Quran down from the shelf. We say we are Muslims. What my father taught is in this book. What my father taught that is in this book, he said, we will keep. What is not in this book, we have to give up. Now, is that a true leader taking us toward the religion of Islam? Yes, it is. We have nothing, Allah says, except what we strive for. And we're striving for this free spirituality, and all praise is due to Allah. We have found it. In my conclusion, let me say this. I don't want to keep you all night, but I have to conclude with this. This is important. Imam Muhammad said, if you want to help in this work, make progress where you are. Make progress where you are. And what does progress mean? It means to move forward. So what better sign of moving forward than owning where you live as a family and owning where you worship as a community? What better sign can you show that you're making progress? We're not stable, dear believers, until we own something. We're not a stakeholder unless we own something. We can't even say, this is my community, unless we own something. We can't say, this is my neighborhood, unless we own something. We can't say, this is my district, unless we own something. Renters can't say that. Leaseholders can't say that. Owners can say that. You can't move a house easily. You can move it, because I used to be in the house moving business. You can move it, but it's not easy to do. You have to own something in order to be stable. Yeah, and you know that. There used to be a place called Fillmore District. A brother was telling me. Now they call it No More. Everywhere you turn, you can see us. Everywhere you look, you can see us. We didn't own Fillmore District. That's why Fillmore No More. If we owned it, we would still be there. But because we were leasing or renting, the owners owned it and the owners sold it. And those people that they sold it to as the Imam was saying today, went up on the rent and we had to go. But if we owned it, we can set what we want to set as our own rent. But we have to own it. We can't say and be happy by saying, this is mine, and we have no mortgage papers, or we have not burned the mortgage papers. Because the real owners, when they come, they push the loitering people out, the visiting people out, and do what they want with the property. Property is called real. It's called real. Real estate. Real property. And when you have real property, you own that. There's a difference between real property ownership and leaseholders ownership. So we have to own that. This property that we were raising money tonight, that the Imam from Texas came all the way here to help raise money for, that's real property. It's not going anywhere. We can go somewhere, but that property is not going anywhere. Now, do we want to go and leave the property, or do we want the property to stay, or we want to stay with the property? Then that means that we have to look at that property as real property and do all that we can to make it real. We have done that in Texas. We have done that in New York. We have done that in parts of California. We own an acre and almost a half, almost in downtown Los Angeles. Don't owe a dime. That's real property. People around us change. We're stable. We can't go. We don't want to go. We'll accept whoever comes next door. But we will be real. This is what we want. We want to be real. And that's why we're here tonight. To drive a stake in the ground. To drive a